Sitting in my grand living room, I watched the emptiness of the house sink in around me. My son, the man I had raised with so much love and hope, was gone forever. The echoes of his laughter were replaced by silence so deep it hurt. But nothing could have prepared me for what came next. My daughter-in-law, the woman I had trusted, suddenly became a stranger with cold eyes. She looked at me not as family, not as the mother of her late husband, but as an obstacle. I never imagined that someone could betray you so completely, so mercilessly, especially in a moment when your heart is shattered. I remember the day it happened as if it were carved into my memory. The morning had started like any other, the sun spilling through the windows, a warm light across the hallway. I was in the kitchen, brewing coffee, when she walked in. Her smile was polite, but there was an edge, a sharpness that made the air heavy. She carried a folder of papers, neatly stacked, with my son's signature on documents I didn't fully understand at the time. The truth hit me slowly, like a cold wave that left me trembling. She had transferred nearly $73 million from my son's accounts to her name. $73 million that he had built from a lifetime of hard work, now gone. My hands shook as I reached for the counter. I couldn't speak, the words refused to come. She didn't hesitate. She told me, in a voice as calm as a morning breeze, that she wanted me out of the house. The house I had lived in for decades, where every corner held a memory of my son's childhood, every photograph a moment frozen in time. She said I was no longer welcome. She didn't just take my money, she took my home, my dignity, my sense of safety. I stood there, stunned, heart pounding in disbelief. The woman who once seemed sweet, who had smiled at family dinners, now looked like someone I didn't even know. My son had been gone for just days, and already, she had erased my place in my own family. I wandered through the rooms, each step heavier than the last. I touched the furniture he had helped me pick, the walls we had painted together, and tears ran down my cheeks. Memories of my son flooded back, his first steps, his first bike, the way he had hugged me tight when he learned to ride. Now, all that love, all that shared history, seemed meaningless to her. She had decided that she alone would benefit from his legacy, and I was nothing but an inconvenient reminder of the past. Days passed like a cruel trick of fate. I slept in a small motel, my belongings packed into a single suitcase. I had no family to turn to, no friends who could help me navigate the storm of betrayal. The news of her actions spread quietly among acquaintances, but few dared to confront her. People whispered, but nobody acted. I was left alone, grappling not only with grief but with the crushing weight of injustice. It wasn't just money or property, it was the sense that the world could be so cruel, even to those who had given their all to love and family. I remember the first night, lying on the narrow motel bed, staring at the ceiling, and feeling the deep ache of helplessness. I thought about my son, about how proud he would have been of the life he had built, and my heart broke all over again. She had stolen more than money, she had stolen the comfort of knowing that his legacy would be protected. I closed my eyes and whispered a prayer, hoping for some justice, some small miracle that would restore what had been taken from me. The betrayal was magnified by the quietness of the world around me. Every knock on the motel door made my heart race, every phone call I received seemed like it could bring more bad news. I had become invisible, reduced to a shadow of a woman who had once been part of a family so full of life and love. And yet, through the despair, I felt a flicker of determination. I could not let grief consume me entirely. I had loved my son enough to honor his memory, and I would fight, no matter how impossible it seemed. Then came the day she called. Her voice, once warm and inviting, now carried panic, desperation, and a hint of fear. She said she needed me. I hesitated, my emotions a whirlwind. How could this woman who had thrown me out, who had taken everything, now come to me for help? But deep down, I sensed opportunity. Not just for revenge, not just for reclaiming what was mine, but to confront the truth, to stand tall despite the betrayal. I agreed to meet her, not in my home, I had no home to return to, but in a neutral place, a quiet cafe where no one knew us. She arrived, fragile and trembling, and for the first time, I saw vulnerability in her eyes. She confessed that she had made mistakes, that she had mismanaged finances, that she felt lost without my son. She begged for guidance, for help navigating a world she clearly could not handle on her own. And there I was, a mother who had suffered unimaginable loss, facing the woman who had caused so much pain, now holding the power to decide her fate. As I listened, I realized that this was more than just a confrontation, it was a moment of reckoning. The anger, the grief, the helplessness, they all converged into a single point of clarity. I could choose to collapse under the weight of betrayal, or I could rise, take control, and reclaim not just my dignity but my sense of justice. Every detail of that encounter remains etched in my mind. The trembling hands, the faltering voice, the desperate gaze, all of it reminded me that even the most confident people can crumble. And in that moment, I understood something essential. Life does not always treat us fairly, but it gives us the power to rise above, to confront adversity with courage and intelligence, to turn tragedy into strength. That meeting marked the beginning of a journey. A journey to reclaim what was mine, yes, but more importantly, a journey to honor the memory of my son. Every step was difficult, every day a test of patience and resolve. But I refused to be defined by betrayal. I refused to let grief dictate my life. And through it all, I discovered an inner strength I had never known, a fire ignited by love, loss, and the unyielding desire to restore justice. I had barely caught my breath from losing my son, and now I was being forced into a decision I never imagined I'd face. Sitting across from my daughter-in-law in that quiet cafe, I could see the fear in her eyes, the panic that hadn't been there before. For someone who had thrown me out, taken everything my son had built, she now needed me. It was surreal. I could feel the tension in my chest, the cold sting of betrayal mixing with the odd spark of power. Here I was, still grieving, and yet in that moment, I held her fate in my hands. She started speaking immediately, her voice trembling, almost apologetic. I don't know what to do anymore, she stammered. Everything is falling apart, and I can't manage it on my own. I stared at her, letting the silence stretch, weighing her words. I could feel the cafe around us fade, as if the world had shrunk to just the two of us. My mind raced. She had been so calculated, so ruthless, and now here she was, vulnerable, almost pleading. Part of me wanted to yell, to tell her exactly what I thought of her betrayal, to make her feel even a fraction of the pain I had felt. But I didn't. Instead, I leaned back, keeping my eyes steady, letting her understand that this was no longer a game. She slid a folder across the table, and I reluctantly looked. Inside were statements, bills, and documents showing what she had done, the transfers, the investments gone wrong, the reckless spending. The numbers made me gasp. $73 million, my son's lifetime of work, vanished. And yet, the real sting wasn't in the money. It was the audacity, the complete disregard for family, for the bond we had all shared. She had used grief as a weapon, exploiting the vulnerability of a mother in mourning. But now, seeing her panic, I realized something crucial: power had shifted. The same woman who had thrown me into despair was now desperate for help. I remembered the first nights after my son's death, the nights of crying alone, of staring at the ceiling in a small, cold motel, feeling every memory of him ache in my chest. I had relived our shared moments repeatedly: his first day of school, the way he had laughed at small things, the way he had hugged me tight when he was scared. And now, here she was, asking me to step in and guide her through the chaos she had created. I could feel a strange mix of anger, disbelief, and a hint of satisfaction. Life had a way of balancing scales, and perhaps this was her reckoning. As I listened, I realized she truly didn't know what to do. Her voice cracked as she spoke about creditors, lawyers, and mistakes that spiraled out of control. I could see the weight of her actions pressing down on her, the same weight I had carried silently for days. But unlike me, she had no moral compass, no past of love and integrity to guide her. Her confusion was raw, almost pitiable, and yet I knew better than to be fooled by it. I had to play this carefully, to understand her motives while protecting myself from further harm. I decided to test her, to gauge how much she had truly changed. I asked questions, simple ones at first, about her finances, about the steps she had taken after taking control of my son's estate. Her answers were shaky, inconsistent, revealing a person who had acted recklessly, without foresight, and now faced consequences she hadn't anticipated. Every slip, every falter, confirmed what I had suspected: her confidence had been a mask, and behind it was fear, uncertainty, and desperation. Time seemed to stretch in that cafe, the sounds of other patrons fading as we were wrapped in our own tense bubble. I could feel my heart beating, a mixture of grief and exhilaration. The power dynamics had changed in ways I hadn't imagined. Just days ago, she had made me feel powerless, as if grief itself was a weapon to push me out of my home and my life. Now, she needed me. And that shift, it was intoxicating, though I masked it behind calm eyes. She began to cry quietly, hiding her face in her hands. I wanted to lean forward, to comfort her, to remind her of the humanity we all share. But I stayed back, letting her face the consequences of her choices. She had underestimated me, underestimated the resilience born from a mother's grief and love. I had survived the unthinkable, and now I watched as someone who had caused immense pain confronted their own fragility. Then she whispered something that struck me: I can't do this without you, I don't even know how to start fixing it. I felt a cold resolve wash over me. Her words were a key, a door opening to reclaiming some semblance of justice. I realized I could guide her, control the situation, and make sure that my son's memory, and his hard-earned legacy, was preserved. But I also knew I had to tread carefully. Any wrong move, any hint of sympathy too early, and she could manipulate me again. I took a deep breath, steadying myself. I told her I would help, but on one condition: she must be honest, transparent, and willing to take responsibility for every single action she had taken. No excuses, no lies. Her eyes widened, but she nodded eagerly. She had no choice. Desperation had stripped away her arrogance. And I could see the realization in her gaze that the tables had turned. For the first time, she was vulnerable, and I had the power to shape what came next. As I began outlining steps, guiding her through the chaos she had created, I felt a strange sense of strength. This was not about revenge, not entirely. It was about reclaiming agency, about turning my grief into action, about ensuring that my son's life and legacy were honored. I could see her listening, learning, and slowly grasping the enormity of what she had done. It was almost satisfying, seeing the very woman who had cast me aside now dependent on the guidance of the person she had wronged. The encounter stretched on for hours. We reviewed accounts, mapped out plans, and identified areas where immediate attention was needed. Her desperation was palpable, her fear evident in every hesitant question. I could sense that this would be a turning point, not just for her, but for me. For days, I had felt powerless, swallowed by grief and betrayal. But now, I had a role, a mission, and a way to channel my pain into action. The shift was invigorating. By the time we left the cafe, the dynamic between us had changed completely. She no longer looked at me with cold calculation but with tentative respect, perhaps even fear. I had survived the worst, and now I was stepping into a position of influence, a role I never asked for but had been thrust into. This was no longer just a story of betrayal and loss, it was a story of resilience, power reclaimed, and a mother's unwavering commitment to honor her son. And in that moment, as I walked out into the fading afternoon sunlight, I realized something profound. Grief can be paralyzing, but it can also ignite strength, clarity, and resolve. Betrayal can feel like the end, but it can also mark the beginning of reclaiming control. And sometimes, those who think they have the upper hand discover, too late, that the true power lies in the hearts of those they underestimated.